Now, the marathon continues on that technicolored speed machine, the Tour de France.
The Tour de France entered the hotlands of the Midi yesterday, and Miguel Indurain's first day in yellow brought a smile to the big man, who now carries Spain's hopes of victory in Paris next Sunday. Miguel Indurain comes to the start this morning in Albi, resplendent in his yellow jersey and all set to defend it for a second day. And he's going to have to defend it today through some of the hottest countryside in France. The field now heading away towards the wine-growing region of the Languedoc. Hello and welcome to our special hours programme on the Tour de France today. It's Sunday and it is a most beautiful summer's afternoon here in France. There's no better way, you know, to watch the Tour de France than to sit on the wall. This is the town of Anduze, 20 kilometres from the finish, and enjoy the local wine, cheese and the bread. This second week of the Tour de France has been really special. We've seen so much happen in this second week, and now we've actually had 8 different leaders of the Tour de France. So let's start with a look back over the second week with Gary Imlach.
It was a strange week in the Tour de France. On Monday, Greg LeMond missed his lunch. Come Thursday, he was missing his teammates in the Pyrenees. And by Friday, he'd been hit by a car. Back on stage 10, though, it all seemed very simple when Jim Ockervitz fixed it for us to be in on a morning team talk as Motorola plotted a Phil Anderson stage win.
If we can get Phil in a little group, you know, I think he's got the best legs and the most consistent legs right now. So we've got to take some chances with him.
Later in the week, Jim would get well and truly fixed himself by the Tour authorities. But on Monday, everything went according to the team manager's plan as Phil Anderson won in Quimper.
How important is the stage win for you?
It's pretty important. Believe me.
You feel good?
Yeah. Stupid questions aside, of course he did, which is more than could be said for PDM, who took team solidarity a bit far by all contracting the same bug at once. On Tuesday, 2 failed to start, Jean-Paul Van Poppel and Martin Early abandoned, and Falk Bowden was eliminated. The PDM team bus was like a mobile sick bay. The following morning, the remaining 4 team members, including race contender Erik Breukink, were checking out of the race and into hospital back in Holland. Phil Anderson, meanwhile, was tuned into Radio Ockervitz, hoping for the sage to predict another stage win. What no one foresaw was the Nantes Express running on time for once, but after a short stoppage, Charlie Motte took the stage win, Le Mans stayed in yellow. But as the Tour headed for Spain, the race leaders seemed to realise it might not be for long.
Everybody wants me to lose. You know, they could gang up on me.
Wednesday was transfer day by plane to Pau. On Thursday, the only thing moving was the race car, as the riders went on strike over the compulsory helmets rule and the exclusion of Urs Zimmermann from the race for driving south instead of taking the Tour plane. After a quick conference, the Tour powers reversed their rulings on both fronts, but since they had to blame someone, they threw Zimmermann's manager, Jim Ockervitz, out of the race. As the heat and the height grew going into the Pyrenees, Zimmermann looked as though he'd have gone happily if it hadn't been for everyone making such a fuss. As the race went into Spain, though, it was a good day for the French, as Luc Leblanc and Charlie Motte broke away with Switzerland's Pascal Richard, who turned his headgear into a roadside souvenir. Le Monde, meanwhile, had been left behind, not just by the breakaway, but by his own team, and began to see his own rest day prediction coming true. With no help coming from his own side, the race leader signalled a truce to his rivals as the Tour threatened to get away from all of them. Bugno responded, but it was too late. In Hakka, Charlie Motte took his second stage win, LeBlanc took yellow, and an unusually subdued Le Monde was forced to try to take it all philosophically.
My team wasn't riding as well as they thought they would, so that was a big handicap. Could be a big handicap for the rest of the Tour.
And there was harder to come on stage 13, the day of the 5 big climbs. On the third, Luc Leblanc cracked. Le Monde followed soon after, and sensing his vulnerability, Indurain attacked. Those are the kind of tactics Claudio Chiappucci understands, and on the final climb to Val Laurent, the Spaniard and the Italian opened up a 7-minute gap over Le Monde's group. At the finish, Indurain was in yellow, Chiappucci the polka dots, and Le Monde in a foul mood. The most mountainous stage of the Tour had left him with one to climb.
Bad dream. No. I don't know, just a lot of things. I mean, you know, at first you think it's over. That was my first thought. But then, you know, you start analyzing it. It's still 9 days to go, 8 days to go. Still some very hard stages. And it's always possible that he has a bad day in one of the days in the Alps. But, I mean, it definitely was a bad day for me yesterday. It's possible I lost the Tour de France yesterday. But it's not over yet. And I still... If my legs can recuperate, I still have a lot of fight in me, at least in my mind. The legs were a little tired today. I don't think I'd have been ready for another mountain stage. The race is not over for Gianni Bugno and Chiappucci and Motte, so Indurain has a lot of work in front of him. It's one thing never winning the Tour and always coming up. It's another thing to be there, and I think physically he's capable of it, but it's mental too.
This is the overall situation this morning, and surely now one of these 6 names will win the Tour de France when it ends on the Champs-Élysées in Paris next Sunday. Miguel Indurain leading Charlie Motte by 3 minutes. Gianni Bugno in 3rd place. In 4th place, the leader of the King of the Mountains, Claudio Chiappucci. 5th is Greg LeMond, but 5 minutes 8 seconds behind. And 6th is Laurent Fignon of France. Well, later in the programme, Gary Imlach will meet the British followers of the Tour. And don't forget, today is quiz day. One of you tonight, for guessing the winner of the stage, will receive the leader's yellow jersey, signed both by the leader of the Tour and by today's stage winner. There's also an extra prize by way of a bonus, and that's the signing on sheet from one of the daily stages, so you'll also get the majority of the riders' signatures as well. The route today is a long one, 235 kilometres, 5 short but quite steep climbs, and it should be a very long, hot day in the saddle for the race.
And missing from the big peloton this morning, I'm afraid to say, because I bet many of you will have voted for this man, is the sprinter Johan Museeuw, who hasn't come to the start and is apparently ill. And the early climbs of the race, Claudio Chiappucci is building now quite a nice little lead for himself ahead of Andy Hampsten in the mountains. He won 3 of the 4 first climbs of the race, beating Thierry Claverola on all of them. And as a result of that, has gone clear now of Andy Hampsten in that competition. The Motorola team in a spell of trouble today because Hampsten's teammates, Sean Yates here and Phil Anderson, were involved in a crash, and as you can see, 1 or 2 quite nasty-looking cuts, especially on Sean Yates. But they remounted and they rejoined the race. Well, now let's join the action, and we are 40 kilometres from the finish. We're looking here at the leader, Moreno Argentin. He won a stage in the Tour de France last year, but he didn't finish the race because he crashed, and he's made his attack on the Côte de Semaine today, and at 184 kilometres covered, his lead was up to 2 minutes 20 seconds. This is the chasing group which is forming behind him. Rolf Goltz is rider 126, and Jean-Francois Bernard is here too on the right of our picture now, and the charge being led by the sprinter Eric van der Aarde, and I'm quite sure he's a name that many of you will have picked for the win today as well. and the other rider in the breakaway is Lietti. So, Paul, this is the chase group. The main field at the last check, I think, was about 3 minutes.
Yeah, 3 minutes 10 to be exact. But the chase is on at the moment. You can see as we look straight down to the field here, it's the Panasonic team taking a charge of affairs at the front here. They want to chase down and try and give Ludwig that stage victory he's been eluding, because now he must be thinking he's one of the favourite sprinters. Abdizaprov is still in there, but as we said, Johan Museo didn't start this morning. It would appear he has an intestinal problem. The same thing, in fact, has hit Johan Brunel. That's probably why we didn't see very much of him during the mountain stages.
Well, there's the red jersey of Panasonic, and just Claudio Chiappucci pushing his way to the front there as well, still pulling well. And what a great rider. Well, it's not Claudio Chiappucci, this one. It's one of the Carrera boys. And indeed, it looks as though the Panasonics are determined to try and close this breakdown. They're left with a reasonable distance still to go. We've just gone through the town of Saint Hippolyte, and they're now in very hot open countryside. Here's confirmation coming up, 2:30 to the chase group and 3 minutes 10 seconds, as Paul has said, to the main field. They got off to a pretty slow start, and I couldn't blame them for that today. It was so hot and humid, and the riders, in fact, only averaging 20 miles an hour for the first 3 hours of the race today. I think that was to be quite predictable, but this rider here this year, Paul, Jean-Francois Bernard, he is riding like the old Jean-Francois.
Well, definitely. And what I think is a very good thing for him is he left France, where there was so much pressure from the media. He was named the new Hino. The press followed him everywhere when he put in a bad performance. They criticised him. I think he left his home country. He went to ride for a Spanish team. The pressure wasn't so good. He got his mind right, and this year he really has come up with the goods.
And that's what the Panasonics would like to do, because their sprinter is Olaf Ludwig. And if you watched our rest day programme, Greg LeMond, who was in yellow then, predicted Ludwig to win the stage today. That is still a possibility, I suppose.
Definitely, if the Panasonics can pull it back together, but they seem to be the team at the moment who are doing all the work in the race and never quite coming up with the goods at the end, because one team has always got to assume control. You do the control, then when we get into the town, somebody's always managed to slip away from the sprinters.
Now, this is the tremendous honours list of Moreno Argentin. Won the Tour de Flanders last year, 4th in Milan-San Remo last year, and he has won the 3 times now, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and also he added another one this time. He's a marvellous classics rider, Moreno Argentin, and he'll be looking forward to the next round of the World Cup, the Wincanton Classic, on the Sunday after the Tour finishes down in Brighton, because with Rolf Sorensen being injured, it might well be that Argentin, who is a teammate of Rolf Sorensen, may come down to Brighton and try to win there. He's a solid rider. He had a superb April time in the Spring Classics, winning the Flèche Wallonne and the Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and he looked absolutely untouchable then. I think, Paul, he's probably allowed his form to dip to try and build back up for the Tour.
Definitely, he's a brilliant rider, and I think he's got a revenge to take on the Tour de France anyway, because last year, after winning that breakaway, winning from a breakaway like this, he crashed out of the Tour de France, which I think ruined his season, because he never really got going again, and I think if he hadn't had that crash, he may well have been the man to have won the World Cup.
He's not a rider for the overall title in the Tour de France, but he is certainly a man to snatch a stage win. And he's taking a tip out of his teammate Bruno Kengialta yesterday, because Bruno broke away 25 kilometres to the end and won the stage there. So they're riding now on a high. There's the yellow jersey today of Miguel Indurain, and riding very comfortably in the pack, but the pace now is high. We're inside 36 kilometres from the finish, and it looks as though Miguel is about to take out some food.
Yeah, he's just going to have a little snack before we get to the finish, just to make sure he keeps his energy levels up there. But it's actually, he's not. He's just checking out what the race route is to find out roughly how far to go. Brilliant tactical move again by the Banesto team. They're so strong here. They've still got 9 riders in the race. They've sent Jean-Francois Bernard away, which takes the pressure off them. They don't have to actually do the chasing. They can say, well, Bernard is the man who's going to take the yellow jersey if you let him get too far. So the other teams have to chase.
Interesting to see there with Miguel, Paul, that in fact when most of the riders carry these little waterproof cards, it looks as though Indurain has actually taken the whole page of the race manual with him.
I think he wants to have all the details necessary, because the little race card only gives the major towns. It doesn't give exact details of the small towns that they go through, and I think he wants to know exactly where he is all the time.
Well, Indurain not concerned by this breakaway by Argentin. He doesn't affect the lead in the Tour at all, but you notice how the yellow jersey always rides near the front of the peloton to keep out of trouble, and he's just riding off the back of the pace being set there by the Panasonics. Let's move up the road by about a minute, and here we have the 2 Ariostia riders here. trying to defend for their man in the lead, and there he is, Moreno Argentin. And the two riders at the back of the group here, Marco Lietti and Rolf Goltz, they won't be taking part in that chase at all. It'll all be left to Van der Arden and Bernard to try and get up to Argentin and give them a free ride across the gap at the same time. I'm surprised to see, well, perhaps not now that we know that Museo isn't here, Paul, but the Panasonics are having no help at all from anybody.
Well, no one wants to help them at all. They know what the score is for the Panasonics. They need to get that stage victory. They need to catch the breakaway, so they're the ones who have to do it.
Well, the man in the middle, Mark van Orso, and the man just gone to front, Dimitri Zhdanov. And they would love to close this race down today. It's been a very long and hard and very hot ride. And it's very oppressive today. Everybody's complaining here at the finish line how tired they feel walking around. So goodness knows how these riders put up performances like this. You see the two passengers sitting at the back from the Ariosta team, while Bernard is doing a lot of the work here. He's a danger man, of course. He must be seen still as a danger man in his Tour de France. He's 9th overall, 8 minutes and 2 seconds behind his team leader. Indurain would have no complaints if he came up and took his yellow jersey off him, but there's no question of that happening today. But Bernard sneaked a few seconds in the breakaway yesterday, almost a minute, off the other favourites in the Tour. He closed the gap, and now he's in the process of sneaking a bit more. And these are on the roads, don't forget, which are not considered to be dangerous roads for the Tour leaders. They're simply stepping stones towards Alpe d'Huez, and we're now just a couple of days away from the big one. It's a very good final few kilometres into the town of Alès today. It goes down one side of the river. There's a 5-kilometre loop and then comes back up the other side to finish. But it's virtually straight all of the way.
One of the safest finishes I think we've had so far in the Tour de France, and this group of 4 riders are soon going to be absorbed by the chasing field. What we have to see now is, will the Panasonics decide that they've actually started to work? Will they continue and chase down the leader of Moreno Argentin?
Well, the first part of the mission is accomplished. The 4 have surrendered. Well, the 2 really, because the other 2 didn't mind whether they went forward or backwards. The Panasonics going around them to try and get the chase reorganised, because they still have to go for the one man who survives.
Well, psychological moment, but you see how straight away there are 4 Ariosta riders there to try and stop them organising the chase. And there's Jelle Neidem from Buckler deciding, right, that break's been caught with Van der Arden, now it's my turn.
Buckler, Neidem rather, for the Buckler team, he was the winner in Valenciennes when Rolf Sorensen crashed.
And straight away the Ariosta team send that policeman with Jelle Neidem. He'll be there just to try and discourage him and say, well, you can chase as hard as you like, but I'm going to sit here, and if you do catch Moreno Argentin, I'll be able to attack you. In fact, this is Marco Lietti, who we saw away a little earlier.
He's done well to find the power to get back into the next attack, having just been caught, but of course he was riding always in the slipstream of Van der Arden and Jean-Francois Bernard. So it looks now as though poor old Jelle Neidem has another Ariosta passenger off in pursuit of the leader. Still a couple of minutes in it, so we'll take a break.
Cycling fans can be split into 2 broad categories. There are those who follow the action and those who like to precede it. You don't usually see them, but on every stage, before the stars come out and the cameras roll, hundreds of amateur riders, not just from France, but all over Europe, converge to ride the race route, so that they can say they've suffered along the same sprints and climbs as their heroes. Some people like to mix pleasure with business on holiday. The Eurolinks tour group prefer to combine it with pain. Not content with just witnessing the suffering of the professionals on the mountain stages, they're here to experience it firsthand.
It's you get the scenery, the sunshine as the weather is now, the atmosphere, and then you see the professional cyclists going through the pain and agony. It makes it a great holiday.
Barry Cahill and Will Halsall, both in their mid-50s, are the veterans of the group. So are you racing up the Col d'Aspin today? No.
Yeah, we'll go quietly. Yeah, it's a rest day for us today. We got the pain out of the way yesterday.
If you're neck and neck though going into the final straight,
you suddenly think, well, maybe I'll just get my wheel ahead of him.
We're British,
We do, yeah, we do. We're very gentlemanly until the last 25 yards, and then we do have a go at each other.
And they did. Proof that even at the age of 54, two businessmen from Prestatyn can be heroes just for one stage.
But really, Barry Cahill here looking in extremely good condition as he rides along in this lime green jersey. A born-again cyclist, 54 years of age, and a delicatessen owner from Prestatyn. Well, he's certainly not going to make too much money as a pro bike rider. Looks as though Will Halsell here is beginning to move clear. He's believed to be a man in his mid-50s, claims to be a construction project engineer, and he's now come back into his own as a cyclist. He returned to cycling 6 years ago, and he is now beginning to show the sort of form one would expect after spending that long on a bike. Heading up towards the top now, he's coming back, is Barry Cahill. There could be trouble for Halsell if he keeps this up, and I can't believe this, but we could well be treated to the first ever sprint finish for the line. Both riders are crossing the line almost together. I can't decide which one is the winner.
All you old guys up there, back home at 50, get a bike and get out here. It's great. You feel 20.
And I couldn't agree more with that, but perhaps not during the last 20 kilometres of the Tour de France. We're now about 30 kilometres, in fact. We just come through the town of Dufour. Here is the peloton. They've gathered up everybody except the man out front, Moreno Argentin, and just the couple of riders we saw escape. I don't think they've come back into the fold yet, and that's Jelen Idam. Yes, they have. No, they haven't. They're still down there. Jelen Idam, and being escorted by the Ali Ostia rider, Marco Lietti. Now, there's a possibility, Paul, perhaps, that if Nidam is allowed to settle into his rhythm, he might pull back Argentin.
Well, he may well, because Nidam is an exceptional man at riding alone, and he will have to ride alone because Lietti won't help him at all. He's no danger overall there, 101st, over 1 hour behind. And if he can get into his rhythm and there's no reaction from behind, then they may well do it. We'll have to try and get back to the main field, though, to see if the Panasonic have reorganised the chase, but it looked after that hard chase that they'd had there that they weren't able to.
Well, there's a split here in the field. I don't think there's been a crash to cause this, but somebody's left the door open. And just look at this as the riders start to reorganise themselves. The countryside rolls all the way into the finish in Alice, and there is one or two small drags rather away from the towns. There's no preams on the top for King of the Mountains, but it looks as though, in fact, Mark Van Orso has tried to go off the front there, immediately jumped on by, I think it could be a Benesto rider. The colours are extremely similar to the colours of the Buckler team. But this might help. If there's continual reaction from the field at this stage, then the gap should begin to come down. So Mark Van Orso joined by the Benesto rider there. In fact, the Benesto rider looks to me as though it might be our old friend Dominique Arnaud, one of the few Frenchmen on the team, who's come up to join the attack. Although our helicopter can't show it, we are in fact on one of those small climbs at the moment, and the crowd here having gathered on the top of it to have a look at the Tour go by. We've been out in the countryside virtually all day today, and we're just seeing the vineyards. The crowds have been in pockets rather than lining the road all of the way, because out in this part of the world there aren't too many pull-offs. You're either on the road or you're in the rubble on the side of it, so there's not really too many places for the Tour people to watch the race go by.
There's no organised chase at the moment. The Panasonics, you see, did all that work again early on to pull back the four-man break with Jean-François Bernard and Eric van der Aarden, and now they've found themselves a little bit tired, and they can't carry on with that effort that they've already made.
Well, they're making hard going of it at the moment, and the roads today are particularly difficult. And to explain more about that, here's Paul.
Today might be a flat stage in the Tour de France, but it's definitely not an easy one. In fact, the riders hate these roads in the Midi because they're so heavy. What they mean by that is they can't float along them because of the gravelly surface. It's also made worse by the fact that it's nearly 35 degrees here at the moment, and the tar's beginning to melt, so they end up sticking to the road. One thing's for sure, in the Tour de France, if it's not the mountains that hurt the riders, it's the road.
Well, one man not having too much trouble with the roads is the leader on the road today, Moreno Argentin. Here he is. And now the road heading nicely towards the finish in Alice. This is the chasing pair. Miguel and Idam doing all of the work. The ticket collector at the back, Marco Lelli, is doing nothing at all in assisting, as he won't, but I suspect if Nydam does take him across to the leader, then he might attack.
Well, he may well do, because he's got an armchair ride here. So much easier to ride behind a rider. You save about 20% of your energy. But the gap is actually coming down. It's 1 minute 55 these two riders are behind, so they've pulled back about 35 seconds already on Argentin.
And there's still time. We're about 23, 24 kilometres on the finish. And any news on the peloton?
Well, the peloton is still stable at round about 2 minutes 45, so these two riders are moving away from the main field and getting across to Argentin. He may well have judged it wrong and gone a little bit too early, but I tell you, it's very difficult out there today. There's Miller just moving up at the top of the screen. Nice to see him having a little bit of a rest before the mountains.
Well, Robert seems to enjoy the hot weather, but he does feel that a lot of the riders aren't enjoying it. Well, we'll see, because if this weather continues to outdo us, my goodness me, that will be a vicious and cruel climb in a couple of days' time. There's the latest time checks, the 1:55 we knew about, 2 minutes 25 down to the peloton, which is where we are at the moment. Indurain just doing enough for keeping himself out of trouble. And it's now being left to the Carrera team, it seems, to close down the gap in favour of Abdu Japarov. He's been sprinting as usual today, picking up points for that green jersey competition on the sprint points along the road. He lost the first one to Peter de Klerk, and he finished second there ahead of Laurent Jalabert. But he too is moving well clear in that green jersey competition. There was one right at the beginning today after 5 kilometres. We'll see the other one because it comes just before the finish at the town of Anduza, where I was sat this morning enjoying that glass of wine.
You see how hot it's been again today. Yesterday the riders, most of the riders did put their crash hats back on again, but here in Argentin's back pocket you can see with the heat that he said, well, I just can't take this, and he's taken his helmet off.
So another 300 francs we have now collected. Well, when I say we, I mean the organisation of the Tour de France. Over £30,000 in fines from the riders for not wearing their crash helmets. And as it is such a universal show by the riders here, then I would suspect that the world body should look at that rule again. And there you can see all of the Tour de France, except 3 riders who are ahead. There's nobody behind the race as far as we know today, because the pace is very slow, and it's only just opened up in the last 20 or 30 kilometres. He's our blackboard man, and now you can see the crowds in the town here as Argentin brings the Tour home. These crowds have been here all day, quite literally. It is now 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the Tour de France, and when we came through it was quite early this morning, and the crowds were here then.
Well, Argentin really is no slouch. He can even win a race in the sprint, but he seems to excel at this lone breakaway, because when he moved clear before, the fact there was such a chase on it split the main field, and they came back to 25 seconds away from him, and he was riding so hard that they all gave up and let him have his leeway again, and he started to build up this maximum lead that he had of over 3 minutes at one stage before we got the reaction from the 4-man breakaway, and then followed by these two.
Well, the glimpse we just had there of Marco Lietti's face looks as though he was actually suffering, even though he is only riding behind Jelle Nydam, because the Dutchman is such a strong rider, and once clear of the main field, he can settle down into a tremendous fast tempo. So it could be, Paul, that he may well pull back Argentin.
I can tell you that man can really ride fast on the flat as well. He can touch over 30 miles an hour for quite a long period of time. And when he first started racing, I was at the end of my career, and I remember once or twice really suffering on his back wheel on a flat stage.
I was just thinking what I said to him in the aeroplane when we transferred down to Pau on our rest day, and I said to him, being a little bit facetious, I said, well, Jelle, you're going to look forward to the next 2 days in the Pyrenees, and he gave a grim smile, because of course he can't climb mountains, but put him back on the flat roads, and he really can go like a train.
Well, the gap is still stable. In fact, Argentin has pulled back an extra 5 seconds there on that little stretch, although Nydam looked to be going superbly. The gap now hovering at 2 minutes for these two riders, with the main field at 2 minutes 30 behind.
And here we are at the same point we were a couple of minutes ago when Argentin went through. Town of Durfort. And the crowd appreciating the Tour de France on its way through on this very, very hot day. Well, actually, we think the town there was La Madeleine, which means that we have 24 kilometres to go to the finish now. And there, from the distance, and across the vineyards of the Languedoc, no problem in following the correct route in the Tour de France. The crowd line it for you. Well, I really think that the Tour de France this year has proved to be even more popular than ever before.
The crowds have been superb, and the Pyrenees, I was a bit upset actually the day into Spain because I thought there would be a lot more people, but definitely that day, the second day in the Pyrenees over the major climbs there, it was unbelievable the number of people that there were around.
A little quiet back road. Argentin's found himself here, lost in the shadows. That's the cause of our little bit of picture breakup, the trees, which are spoiling our signals from the motorbikes there. So we'll go back to Moto 2. If you haven't worked it out yet, by the way, Moto 1 always follows the leader or the leading group in the Tour de France. Moto 2 follows the second group on the road, and Moto 3 the main field. And I have to say that those three motorcycle pilots must be amongst the best bike riders in the world, because the way they guide their motorbikes through this lot, especially when we're in the mountains, makes one marvel. And I think we've moved on now towards the town of Anduze. We've just gone through the sprint. Now we'll go across the town square. We'll shortly cross the river. And there's the left turn, and then there'll be a sharp right and across the river. Very, very desert-like down here, just up from the Mediterranean. And the waters, I have to say, looked awfully low to me today as we passed through of the rivers. There's the river bridge. They're right over the top. Just look at this crowd. What a marvellous crowd welcoming the leader of the Tour through today, Moreno, Argentin. Well, he's clearly taken the last sprint of the race. And there's the 20-kilometre banner just ahead. Thank you very much, sir. And 20 kilometres and 12 miles to go for Moreno, Argentin of Italy. So we'll take a break.
Well, the first half of the climbing test on this year's Tour is over, and Lawrence Roach, our rookie, has passed. Not with flying colours, but then that was never really the idea. Lawrence knew the Pyrenees were going to be tough, and they lived up to his expectations. He lost 35 minutes going into Spain, and another 40 on the Tour's toughest stage to Val-Laurent.
20 kilometres ago, and I just started going sideways, especially up the last climb. Like, it was just, I don't know how I got up it, but I managed to get up it. Like, it just seemed eternal. Every kilometre was like 100.
When we went looking for Lawrence before yesterday's stage start, we thought we'd caught him chatting up a French fan. In fact, it was his wife Aileen, over in France for a few days to lend encouragement.
Well, I'm very proud of him to be in the Tour de France, but it's very difficult. I'm very nervous every day, just hoping he'll get through everything. The mountains, I've been up there the night before, and it's nerve-wracking in the car, never mind on a bike, but it's doing great so far. It's very good.
Lawrence is now lying an hour and 51 minutes behind the race leaders, but that's not really the important thing. For a first-timer, the Tour is all about finishing, and so far 26 riders have abandoned or been eliminated from this year's Tour, 12 of those in the Pyrenees. And while we're on the subject of those no longer with us, the latest news on the PDM team is that the tests to try and identify the mystery illness which struck them down all at once have been completed, and the chief suspect is a bacterial infection in the intravenous glucose drip the riders hooked themselves up to after a hard day's stage. Finally, a reminder of the competition to predict today's stage winner. The first correct answer out of Phil's blazer pocket will win today's yellow jersey, signed by the yellow jersey holder and today's stage winner, and a unique piece of Tour de France memorabilia, the signing-in sheet from stage 3, which has on it the signature of every rider in the race, save that of Stephen Roach, of course, who was eliminated the day before in the team time trial. OK, the riders are now on the road to Alès. Let's rejoin them.
Well, thanks, Gary, and the action hotting up now. We're just inside 10 kilometres to go for Moreno, Argentin, and the two chasing riders behind originally, who were Yellow Nidam and Marco Lietti. They've been caught, and there is now quite a group at 2 minutes and 5 seconds.
But they're still not pulling anything back on Argentin at all. He's doing a storming ride there at the front. There's his team manager there, just letting him know what the situation is. There are 8 riders chasing him, and we know that he's only got 10 kilometers to go. I doubt if he's going to get caught. The 8 riders chasing are Wegmuller, Mauro Ribeiro from RMO, who won that stage into Rennes the other day, Franz Masson from the Buckler team, Rolf Goltz, who is also a member of the Ariostia team, Dominic Krieger from the Helvetia La Swiss team, Valerio Tibaldi from the Gatorade team, Maurizio Fondriest of Panasonic, and Philippe Louvio.
So that's a very talented chase group indeed, but I'm afraid Argentin at the moment is holding them all at bay. This is Fondriest, former world champion, leading the chase after a former world champion, because Argentin won the world title in 1986 in Colorado Springs, the first time that championships had been held in the United States on the road. And Rolf Goltz there alongside him, and he won't help him at all, of course, because Goltz is the teammate now of Moreno Argentin.
Well, Fondriest not too pleased there, but that's the name of the game as they go under the 10 kilometer to go banner as well. That's the name of the game. That's why Rolf Goltz is there. He's there to do a job and try and discourage these 8 chasers catching his leader.
Well, this has been a superb performance by Argentin. He broke away on the climb about a kilometre from the top of the small climb of the Côte de Cement, and he went over the top of that ahead of Clavarola and Stephen Rooks. That stopped the fine run of Claudio Chiappucci. He had won them all until then, and he didn't look round. He kept on going. He rapidly built a 2-minute advantage. Here's the peloton coming under the 10-kilometre banner now, so they're not very far behind that group of 8. And again, it is Benesto at the front of the charge. There's the yellow jersey of Miguel Indurain. He'll be quite content with the way this stage has gone. He's not interested in the £5,000 stage prize, only in keeping that yellow jersey, which of course will be worth £200,000 to him in Paris. Although if tradition is kept, he will give all of that money away to his teammates. And thank you for those of you who phoned in and spotted my deliberate mistake the other day when I gave you the answer to one of the questions and said the first time the Tour de France had come to England was in 1973. Well, actually, that was my first Tour de France. The first time it came to England was the following year, in 1974.
There's a quick time check on Argentin there, and a triathlete there trying to ride alongside to get a bit of a glimpse at Argentin. But let's not forget that Argentin has been riding for over 200 kilometers, and the triathlete on the far side of the barrier there has probably only been going for about 600 or 700 meters. The main field is still 2.5 minutes behind, but they're almost on the tail of that chasing group of 8 riders.
I've never seen that in the Tour de France before, Paul. A rider not in the race trying to keep up with Moreno Argentin. There's an example of a rider who's ridden today almost 200, well, over 200 kilometers now, and that rider tried to stay with him for a couple of 100 yards, and Moreno's just gone on by himself. Gave us some idea just how fast these professionals can ride. There's the good news for Moreno. They're saying 1:55 now to that chase group, so they're pulling him in ever so slightly. 2:30 back to the peloton, and it could be that the peloton will pull back those 8 chasers before the finish. We're heading now into Alice. We run along the river. The river is over on the left there. Can't quite see much water in it at the moment. And then the race switches over the bridge over the river, circles underneath, and then runs along the other side of the embankment down to the finish.
All these riders here chasing Moreno Argentin are turning onto the embankment now as well. They're on the same side, but they go right the way down the river, over the bridge at the back, and come back into the town. They're not very organised at the moment. They must be worried a little bit about doing too much work. If they do catch Argentin, who's going to win the sprint? And all this is good for Argentin, who's still fairly stable. He's got just around about the 2-minute mark, 1:55, which is enough, I think, to hold off these riders, because he's not the kind of rider who's going to crack in the last 5 kilometres.
Well, what a coincidence to see our Brazilian rider who won the competition for last week when we finished the stage last Sunday. That was his first ever stage, and indeed Brazil's first ever stage in the Tour de France. He's now in this leading group again, but of course Moreno Argentin looks like spoiling any chance he might have had of pulling off a rather interesting double. Looking down at some of your votes, by the way, congratulations to those who chose Marco Lietti today, and apparently a number of you did. He's in this chase group. Well, he's not in the chase group now, but he's been in the frame all day until the last couple of kilometres, and that is an interesting selection. And I wonder how many of you have chosen Moreno Argentin.
Just look at the concentration of Argentin here. He's not even thinking about looking round at all to see what the time gap is. He's looking across the river to see where the finish is. He really has got a lot of power, this man. He just sits squarely on the bike. You notice how the top of his body hardly rocks at all that power coming from the thighs and out of the back of the lower back there.
He's now 30 years of age, Moreno, and he turned professional in 1980 towards the end of that season. And when he came to the Austria team at the start of last year, they paid him £250,000 for last year. He had such a good season, I think he's on even more now. Classic winner, certainly, apart from the World Championship win, Liège-Bastogne-Liège 4 times. He's catching Eddie Merckx, who won it 5. And look at this now, down to 1 minute 50.
Well, it's 1 minute 50, but it's still stable on the main field. It's 2 minutes 37. He's not very far away from the 5-kilometre banner. In fact, in the red car that just came alongside there for a second was Bernard Hinault, who will be telling him just exactly what the situation is, how far he's got to go. And Hinault is a man who can appreciate a victory like this. He's won many races himself in the same fashion, and I think he was just saying, come on, boy, you've only got 5Ks to go.
A great feeling, and he's won so many races like this. He did a similar thing when he won the race on stage 3, which is the longest stage of the Tour last year, but then crashed, and his Tour de France ended rather abruptly. The crowd straining forward here to catch a glimpse of the man who's almost certain now to be the stage winner today. This is the circle that loops him back down onto the other side of the river now.
It looks as if it's going to be a brilliant double by the Austria team here after that victory yesterday by King Gialta. It's going to look as if Moreno Argentin is going to make it the 2 up for them.
That was a tight turn, and there you can see it from the top now as the main field come down, and
but they're still on the other side of the river. They've got to go over the bridge yet, so Moreno Argentin still got quite a gap in front because this is quite a long bridge, probably about 700-800 metres. They were going through the 5-kilometre to go sign there.
And of course, the closer they get, the less some of the riders will want to do in this escape, because they'll start to plan on how they're going to take second place, and the impetus might drop off a little bit. Well, I'm glad to see that Dominic Krieger has come into this group. There he is going to the right of our picture, brief glimpse of the man in the purple top to his jersey, because he created quite a long breakaway today early on. He was hauled back, but clearly he's had his tail up, and he's now found himself in the chase group on the road. Chance to look at the face now of Argentin. The sort of course today which he would enjoy. He's a man that enjoys the Ardennes in Belgium, where he's won Liège-Bastogne-Liège and the Flèche Wallonne. He's seen as the man of the Ardennes. And look at it, it's coming down reasonably quickly though, Paul.
It's coming down slowly, really. There's only 10 seconds they've taken in the last kilometre or so, and that's not going to be enough because there's less than 5 kilometres to go now. You see they're just turning down the corner where Argentin went before to go back down alongside the embankment. Argentin here at 3 kilometres to go, so, you know, 2 minutes is quite enough. I think he's got it in the bag.
Yeah. It must be a nice feeling too. Austria have had mixed fortunes in the Tour. They won the team time trial. Here's the chasing group round that very tight turn, and there's another group off the front now. So the Tour de France in the last couple of kilometres spinning up at the head of the field, because that group on the top of our picture has just escaped off the front of the big peloton. Now, as I was saying, the Austria team, they started with a superb win in the team time trial, despite the crash approaching the finish, with Rolf Sorensen and Argentin going down a couple of 100 metres to the finish. Sorensen remounting and finding himself as the race leader. Then Sorensen himself crashing out while he was the leader of the Tour. And they've now bounced back in these last couple of days, linking the Pyrenees to the Alps by winning yesterday with Bruno Kengialta, and certainly today too with Moreno Argentin.
I just caught a quick glimpse of Argentin's gears there. He was using the 14th tooth sprocket, so he's not using the biggest gear that he's got at the moment. Riding comfortably on a 53 tooth chairing at the front, 14 teeth at the back. Really quite comfortable today. I think he's going to savour this last kilometre and look at the crowd to welcome him home.
So into the final kilometre for Moreno Argentin. He's judged it perfectly today. There's nobody going to catch him now. He can take all the time in the world. He's not racing for time, of course, because in this year's Tour de France he's lost far too much. He is over 1 hour, 1 minute behind as he goes under that kilometre banner in 85th position. Even a 2-minute improvement today will only lift him about 2 places up the overall classification. And the sprint already starting further back behind Argentin for the race for second place. And this looks like Dominic Krieger who's attacked.
Well, that's why he dropped to the back before, just to get a little bit of a rest, then try and surprise him. But the reaction behind has been quite violent, and I should think they may well just, in a second or two, get onto his back wheel.
Well, last Sunday, it was Ribeiro who managed to slip away from the lead group, and although they were right on him on the line, he held off for the win. He's in this second breakaway again today. Frans Masson is there too, a good sprint finisher. Fondries can sprint. Philippe Louvio, former champion of France, may have a good finish in there today. And as we see Moreno Argentin go off to the right, let's pick him up on our finish line camera. Here he is. As he comes up towards the line now, it's all the day of the Austria team yet again. Little punch in the air there. A stage win in his first Tour de France last year, and now he's going to add stage win at number 2 in his second Tour de France. 6 hours, 21 minutes there. Lovely applause from the crowd after the long, hot day in the saddle. But Thomas the Tank has gone clear. Thomas Wegmuller has jumped from the main chase group. And the man who won the Grand Prix des Nations time trial is now going to have to provide a similar finish if he's going to hold on for second place. But it looks as though he's got plenty left in those legs today. The clock counting down on the right. The average speed just under 37 kilometres now. So that's quite a respectable ride at the end. When you think for the first 3 hours they averaged only 32 kilometres an hour. So now can Thomas hold off the chase group? He wasn't really enjoying his Tour de France until today. His results have been quite poor. He suffered through the Pyrenees, but he's come back strongly now. There's the gap he has. One lone rider chasing him. Might well be Frans Masson, but we'll have to get a bit closer to see if it is. And here comes Thomas. His face a picture of pain, but it won't be for much longer now. I think he's going to hang on. It looks like Ribeiro, in fact, who's come through clear of the chase group. And he's done what he did last week. First a week ago, getting third place today by the look of it. And Thomas Wegmuller gets second place with that lovely attack towards the end. And coming over the line in third place is Ribeiro, led home by Fondries in fourth. And then it looked to me as though we had the Gatorade rider was very close as well. That'd be Tebaldi. Now the second group that successfully escaped from the field, and still no Abdu Japarov here either. So he's not done too much for himself this time. And it's the TVM team who take over the finishing line here, and the rider coming in there looked to me as though it was Eddie Schurer, but I wasn't too certain about that. Here's the big field now coming home. The yellow jersey not too far away from the action, but not interested. Here comes the Tashkent Tornado leading them in. 1 minute 50 seconds down. Abdu Japarov ends today's stage of the Tour de France, and what a hot one.
So for the second day running, an Italian on top, and from the same team. This time it was Moreno Argentin. In second place, Thomas Wegmuller. Third place, Mauro Ribeiro. He won last Sunday, remember. In fourth place, Maurizio Fondries. Fifth, Frans Masson. On the podium, Moreno Argentin, and 45 of you actually voted for Argentin to win the stage. So that means now we'll have to go to the hotel and draw the lucky postcard out of the hat. The overall situation today, no change at all. Miguel Indurain remains in the yellow jersey, 3 minutes ahead of Charlie Motte. Gianni Bugno in third place, Claudio Chiappucci. Then comes Greg LeMond, and finally Laurent Fignon in sixth place. Well, here it is, the yellow jersey of the Tour tonight, signed by the race leader, Miguel Indurain, and by the stage winner, Moreno Argentin. Once we've made the draw tonight, we'll announce the lucky winner on tomorrow night's programme, and then after this tour is over, we'll be sending you the yellow jersey. The crashes today, we saw Phil Anderson and Sean Yates fall off. In fact, we've spoken to Sean Yates, and it appears he has torn an artery in his arm, and he doesn't know yet whether he will be able to continue in the Tour tomorrow. Greg LeMond also took a tumble when the race went over a narrow bridge. He was on the wrong side of the bunch, and he hit the side of the bridge and fell off. Happily, no damage done. He remounted and got back into the Tour. Well, we're on our way now towards the Alps. Tomorrow is 215 kilometres to Gap, and from Gap you can see the mountains again. The Tour de France goes on, but for the moment, from a very hot and humid Alès, I'll say a very good night to you.